ever done to deserve even one of the blessings I've known? What did I ever do that was worthy of you, or the kindness you showed? Lord, help me, Jesus.
I am Lynn Stewart. What do I do? Well, I was a criminal defense lawyer, forced to early retirement. Well, on February 10th, 2005, the jury in the Southern District of New York came back and found me guilty of charges that were brought by the government based solely on my work as a lawyer. I was convicted, the most serious of which was materially aiding a terrorist organization. And this was based on my political defense work in behalf of a Muslim cleric, usually associated with World Trade Center 1, Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman. He was associated with it but never convicted of that, and was convicted, though, in 1995 of a conspiracy to bomb New York landmarks. It was a case which I always felt was an injustice after the verdict, and perhaps that informed to some degree the degree with which I thought the man had to be defended. When you're addressing a jury, you know when you've got them. You know when they have that wonderful anticipation that they're listening, they're hanging on every word. There's a silence that occurs in the courtroom when you've done it in such a way that, you know, your entire audience, not just the people in that jury box, but everybody that's listening, is waiting for the next word. Someone said the most beautiful words in the English language are not guilty. To me, poetry and words are true distillations of thought, and I use them in my work, and I use them actually in thinking things through sometimes, because they become an essence of what I'm thinking about. They are an emotional nudge to people that might not exist otherwise. It's a poet has crafted those words to really give someone what do they say, the ice water on the back of your neck. I'm reading from John Ashcroft to John
Ashbery. Close. I wonder if John Ashbery.
I guess I have John Ashcroft on the brain. I can't imagine why. John Ashbery has been a favorite of mine. I like some of his things better than others, of course. I'm reading from The Absence of a Noble Presence by John Ashbery. If it was treason, it was so well handled that it became unimaginable. No, it was ambrosia in the alley under the stars, and not this undiagnosable turning, a shadow in the plant of all things, that makes us aware of certain moments, that the end is not far off since it will occur in the present, and this is the present. No, it was something not very subtle then, and yet again, you've got to remember we don't see that much. We see a portion of eaves dripping in the pastel book and are aware that everything doesn't count equally. There is dreaminess and infection in the sum. And since this too is of our everydays, it matters only to the one you are next to this time, giving you a ride to the station. It foretells itself, not the hiccup you both notice. Fear is a definite reality. People are afraid, and they're so afraid that they surrender to the government. I think the jury in the case surrendered to the government, to their notion of what had to be done to protect people, in which they lumped me along with everybody else. I'm convicted of breaking government rules that were put in place for this specific client, Sheikh Omar, and these specific rules dealt with whether he had a right to speak to the media, and indeed whether I had a right to speak to the media. What I was convicted of was making a press release. This has a First Amendment implication. These were his words only. We're not talking about spiriting the man out of the jail cell, even though the government liked to refer to it as this was a prison break. But it was really the words, and in our Constitution, this is the First Amendment. The government also listened to all the conversations between my client and myself. And so as one of my neighbors said the other day, well, what does your case prove? It proves you can't talk to your lawyer anymore, because they listened in. In the larger view that it's a big chunk out of the Bill of Rights, my conviction. It implicates the right to counsel, the right to remain silent, as we said, the First Amendment, the right to freedom of speech. All of these things are implicated by this case, and they're all diminished by it. And when we allow the Bill of Rights, which was the people's response to the Constitution, they said, okay, we'll go along with the separate houses and the courts and all this, but we have got to have a bill that says how we are protected from the government. That's what the Bill of Rights is. And the states were not ratifying the Constitution until that Bill of Rights was put in place. And to the degree that this case definitely diminishes the Bill of Rights, people have to say, are we willing to trade that off for somehow a sense of being safe, when really this government has never, ever answered the real questions? And the real question is, why 911? Why did that happen? Why did 19 young men sacrifice their lives to do this? What had happened? We've never talked about that in this country. Never. Well, William Blake, of course, was an English poet who wrote way back when, 1600s? 1700. He was such a clear, crystal, incandescent writer. William Blake also, of course, has written a quintessential poem that we used in children's literature. When I was an elementary school librarian, you could always get a class's attention by saying, "Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night." They were all there then. They were with you. I'd like to read from William Blake, On Another's Sorrow. Can I see another's woe and not be in sorrow too? Can I see another's grief and not seek for kind relief? Can I see a falling tear and not feel my sorrow's share? Can a father see his child weep, nor be with sorrow filled? Can a mother sit and hear an infant groan, an infant fear? No, no, never can it be. Never, never can it be. And can he who smiles on all hear the wren with sorrow small, hear the small bird's grief and care, hear the woes that infants bear, and not sit beside the nest, pouring pity in their breast, and not sit the cradle near, weeping tear on infant's tear? Poetry makes others feel. There's no question about that. And we Americans, we sort of have unfortunately equated poetry with some kind of effeminate stuff. So when I've used it in poetry in my work, many times the male district attorney or U.S. attorney will have to say something, to denigrate it. Oh my God, she's reading poetry to the jury, or oh, Lynn, what about little roses are red so we can all understand it? Just like the boys in the 8th grade, it hurt them somewhere and they didn't want to show how it touched them, so they're going to cover it up. I became a lawyer in 1976, so I'm pressing 30 years. Graduated from Rutgers Law School in Newark, which was a hotbed of activism. So came out of that and out of my own 1960s, spent organizing in the communities around the schools, and then the war, and then women's issues. So I came out of a lot of struggle and went to law school in Newark, New Jersey. From that, I defended many, many people, mainly people who had been active in the 60s and 70s, some of whom had been underground for many, many years. Among those, the people in the Black Liberation Army, the Weather Underground, the United Freedom Front, Black Panthers. Everyone hates lawyers, but nobody hates their own lawyer when they need him. The movement should be afraid because we are the most vulnerable, the people who are activists, the people who are still unafraid to open up their mouths, and they have to be afraid that the activist lawyers are just not going to be there to defend them.
Call upon my dear friend and comrade, and the person really that's carrying the ball for everybody in this room and everybody in this country that cares about constitutional rights, and everybody in this country that doesn't even understand it yet, that's going to understand it when we get through with our educational campaign. Lynn, thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael just whispered in my ear, took a conviction to get this response. But I must quote the very wonderful Jane Tiger, who said to me on the phone today, you know, Lynn, where there's fertilizer, only she used a four-letter word, there's always growth. And we're going to make it grow. We're going to make this revolution. We're going to change things. I'm happy to say I came down from Harlem. I had my buttons pushed by the best in the business, Nellie Bailey, who said, "You're going to the rally in the church, but don't forget about us up here." So I made both rallies, and I'm telling you, 200 people turned out in Harlem. 200 people who are ready to do this. And I was on speakerphone to Bellingham, Washington for their rally, and I spoke on the radio in Portland, as well, of course, as our own WBAI, who has always been there. Tuesday night on the way home, we're at the drugstore, and who comes on the radio but I have to say my friend and comrade, Mumia Abu-Jamal. His clear, concise statement is for you to take. He buried, I said to Ralph, buried in the belly of the beast on death row, can take the time to elucidate, to champion. If Mumia can do it, what can we do out here? joke. I want to say that, you know, the most remarkable thing is, as we look around this room, is the people who have come together. We've all lived for decades through the so-called sectarian left. We've all lived together. We've been on the same marches, but it really shows that when there's an issue, a real issue, an issue that affects us all, we can come together. And we need to come together now as never before. I have a client, he's a mob guy, and he likes to get on Ralph's case. He likes to act like Ralph is making me into some kind of Scottsboro boy. And I keep saying to him, and Ralph keeps saying to him, you know, we have to restrain ourselves here. It's not a question for us of not fighting this thing. It's not a question of taking it to the government. It's only a question of tactics, of when and where and how. But the idea of not fighting is unthinkable. It's unthinkable to me. It's unthinkable, I hope, to all of you. I hope you heard Dan Orshak when he said the applause had already begun, so it was sort of swallowed. But he said, and our children. Well, my children are grown, but my grandchildren aren't grown, and the future generations that come after us, I'm not saying we're not doing this for us. We're doing it for us. We're out here now. We are under the heel of this boot. But I am saying that if we don't stop it now, they will not have the opportunity to rise up in the way we have now and say, no more. No más. We wanted this to be the biggest victory party that ever was. We wanted to bring a victory to the movement who has seen so many setbacks, starting with the election, the Florida results, when the people did not take to the streets, followed by the aftermath of 9/11, when so much was rushed through Congress, when so much happened, the attack on Afghanistan, the attack on Iraq, all of these things we have not had the strength to fight enough to really organize people, to really get to the people. And I'm not saying that my case can get to the people, but it certainly speaks in a way very personally to folks that other things don't speak to. And I think for that reason, it is something that we can use to organize around, and I'm perfectly happy to be the foil for that organizing. I don't want folks to get distracted by those sayers, those naysayers, who want to say, well, she went over the line. She is not like the rest of us lawyers. We would not do that. Or the one who sent an email to Florence Morgan, president of the National Black Lawyers, and said, thank God. There she is. I can hear her. I can't see her. She's too loud. There she is, right in the end. There is that opposition. This is not universal. We knew it was not universal when that jury spoke, that jury that we and all the people who sat with me through 8 months, they're here in the front rows, Dolphy and Dominic and Ginny and Elizabeth and Glover, we all were there. They saw that jury. We all had high hopes. We thought, yes, these are Manhattan people. Yes, these are New Yorkers like we are. Yes. If anyone can understand what's at stake here, if anyone can do this, they can do it. We put our faith in them. And we were disappointed. There's no question about that. It hit us like a truck. We used to say a Mack truck, but it hit us just like that. And it took a while to bounce back here, but we're back. And the fact of the matter is, we need to create the climate in which jurors are not afraid, in which the people are not afraid. I was asked on the radio in Portland, Oregon today whether I really thought that fascism was the word to be used about what was happening here. And I remembered back when I was a teenager in the early 50s, and they used to talk about, some of my relatives, about creeping socialism, that the country was going to wake up one morning, it would be socialist, and proof of that was Social Security and the welfare system, and would that it had happened. But we really have been subjected to creeping fascism. And it comes in very slowly, but it still wears those boots. And it still stands on your neck when you least expect it. And it still comes out. And I said to them in Oregon, I said, it's not creeping anymore, it's galloping. And we need to stop it now. And there are people in the audience who I know have been fighting fascism in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, and the 80s and the 90s up until today. And I know we are tired, but we must continue because there is no other place to go. If we don't fight it, it will take over and we will not be able to live a life or be the human beings that we need and want to be. I have one note that I want to make, an announcement that's very sad to me and sad, I know, to all of you, because my beloved lawyer, my comrade, my tall Texan who held me up during this trial and figured the strategy and was the brilliant mind and made the summations and the openings and the pretrial motions, has had to withdraw from the case. This he has done. Michael Tiger has withdrawn from the case for health reasons. He asks us all to respect his privacy and not go further than that, and I, for one, will not. But I don't want anyone to think there's any ill will, because Michael and I dearly love each other, and I know if he could, he would be here, he would be sitting right up here with Jill tonight to help explain what went on and what we need to do. I've decided that his place will be taken by Josh Draytell. He is not necessarily a Manhattan household name, but then again, neither was Michael Tiger when we started out. But Josh is well known among the circles of lawyers who respect and understand those who take on the representation of people who are least favored by the government. And Josh has represented people involved in the embassy bombing and in Guantanamo. He has written a book, which I think some of you may have seen the reviews of. It's called The Torture Papers. And I feel that his coming into this case gives us a leg up, because he has written many of the briefs which were submitted by organizations such as DANS that backed up our legal positions to the court. He is brilliant, he is caring, he is someone that we can rely on in a situation like this, although I have to tell you, he, like all those lawyers, said to me, Lynn, when you speak, you think you could tone it down a little? Well, you know what the answer was to that. I said, Josh, I'll do anything, but I can't do that. I have to speak because I have to speak. We also this week had an instance once again of some insidiousness by a person who called many of the organizations to announce that he was calling from the Lynn Stewart Defense Committee, and that Lynn Stewart no longer wanted the support of all these leftist groups because they were ruining her image, and would they please cease and desist. Unfortunately, people like people like Leslie Kagan know that Pat Lavasser is a phone call away, and she says, who from the defense group is this guy? What is he talking about? So within a matter of hours, that bright notion was completely squelched, and this person, whoever he may be, and the phone number that he left, is no longer on the scene. And Ralph said something about anytime, anywhere, he's ready for him. But I want to close by saying we are going to fight, and you know, it's a funny thing. People told me when they got up on Friday morning, they were just so disheartened. They just wanted to go back to bed and hide under the covers. I think that our attitude has to be like the attitude of my dear friend, who has been my friend since I was 15 years old, who called me on Friday morning and said, I'm not sad, I'm fighting mad. I'm so angry at these people. How dare they do this to you? And that, I think, has got to be our response, that we have to organize ourselves, organize others, get out there, protest. We need your input into this. This is not something that we can do on our own. We have ideas. I don't know how many of them have been spoken about, but we have ideas. We want to do meetings like this. We want to do small meetings. We want to organize people to write letters. I was on Air America over the weekend, Laura Flanders. I said, gee, we'd like to see if we can't get 100,000 letters to the judge. I had this image of, you know, Miracle on 34th Street and them going and dumping all these letters. She looked at me and she said, 100,000, we can get 1 million letters. So I said that should be our goal, 1 million letters.
I'm writing a letter to the judge. Would you please change your mind? And I have a doctor's degree that I take seriously, a doctor's in jurisprudence, that I'm actually trying to be like a doctor in this situation. What words could this judge say to change his mind out loud? I note your having been editor of the Harvard Law Review and clerking for Potter Stewart, a remarkable achievement, putting you in a class above the political hacks of the Second Circuit, calling for more blood. And if you look at
Go and read the letter.
Well, I say here, I studied engineering at Caltech, earned a JD from the U of Chicago, minoring in anarchism. I have spent 40 years taking the Juris Doctor degree literally, struggling to actually work out how we might correct the pathological shortcomings of the American legal system. At the University of Chicago Alumni Seminar Day a couple years ago, a professor proved with statistics that at the federal level, judges vote almost totally according to political party. So our system is arguably corrupt, not in the service of justice, but politics. I witnessed the resentencing proceedings in the overflow room. I beheld your efforts to rationalize what you felt you had to do. Noticed you repeatedly stating the Second Circuit wanting 360 months and consecutive terms, so your 120 months wouldn't sound so bad. I have heard the outpourings of so many who were displeased with your ruling. I have spent nights of troubled sleep, wondering what might be done to make things right. And here, dear Judge, is a truly friendly, friend of the court effort to help justice happen without sacrificing your judicial career, language within the legalisms prevailing. You start off, of course, you have reconsidered. You could say that you were moved by Lynne Stewart's explaining that she loses a piece of herself every day she suffers imprisonment. That got you thinking. Maybe she has already suffered enough.
Let me just quickly, are you done? Did you read the whole?
No, I got plenty to go. Oh, no, another couple of paragraphs. Why should such a wonderful self suffer the loss of any more pieces? That occurred to you as a simple truth. Why should I make this woman suffer anymore?
Well, is
It
that,
occurred to him. But
read the letter, Joe.
Well, the main point I want to get to is, well, okay, I'll keep reading. The pains of imprisonment are not properly appreciated in this land that supposedly values human freedom and liberty. For an individual to suffer even 1 day's loss of that freedom should be regarded as a very great suffering. American prison sentences are longer than in other countries, as you probably know. Privatizing prisons has created a political dynamic to increase sentences as a cash cow for the prison industry. What gets years in the U.S. get months in more enlightened countries, many where imprisonment is not so deliberately destructive as is here. Punishment by imprisonment for breaking law is a medieval conception. It is largely obsolete. Custody of any kind is only justifiable when there is actual danger to the community. People should not be made to suffer. Comparing what Lynn did to what goes on day after day in Washington ought to register as outrageous, to put it mildly. Bribery rules in Washington. Therefore, the laws they come up with are not so sacred that breaking them is morally condemnable. Isn't that obvious? That brings up another line of attack for you. You might declare, and this is the big one, Judge, you might declare you have decided the whole war on terror and its corollaries are unconstitutional and overreaching by the state at the expense of individual freedom to promote rule by fear, as if we are in an actual state of declared war. It is misusing of the term war to infringe upon constitutional limitations for imposing martial law. The underlying logic of the crimes of Lynn Stewart acting as a conduit for merely information, then regarding that as materially aiding terrorists, is fascistically treating information as a weapon. And I'll stop there except to say that
we may have a caller.
That to call information a weapon, we're talking about thought crime. And the idea of thought crime and fascistic thinking is the issue. So basically it's an appeal now for the public to urge a reconsideration as appropriate in this situation. It is a biblical monument. If the judge were really to do it, it would be shocking.
We have a caller?
Yes.
And while we're getting the caller on, just let me introduce from my right to my left who's sitting here. We have Vinie Burrows, a well-known actor and a member of the Granny Peace Brigade. We have Colia Clark, who is coordinator of the International Commission of Inquiry on Haiti. She's a historic civil rights, human rights, and peace advocate, and she's running for U.S. Senate. I, of course, am Posr.
You go past me.
Ralph Poynter, activist. Met Lynn Stewart as an activist and teacher, and as Lynn was a librarian in 1962 in Harlem, and we fought for community control. That is the economic, political, social control of the schools, as everyone else in the world enjoys, except black people in the inner cities in America. And this was the beginning of our togetherness and our understanding and our learning tree for that which we call America.
Now, is that caller there? Because if that caller's not there, and do call in. We want to take questions. Come on down to the studio.
Hello?
Yeah, hi. Do you have a question or a comment on case of Lynn Stewart?
Well,
Ralph, why don't you get back?
Yes.
Because before we were on air, you were talking about the school system and how Lynn had.
I think the caller's there.
Caller, are you there?
Oh, sorry, we lost him.
Okay. So why don't you
yes, I was talking about the school system, and this basically tells you who Lynn Stewart was. It was not so long ago that we were the outcast. I'm talking black people in America in the 60s. We did not get the civil rights law until 1965. That is the first federal law against lynching, meaning that lynching in the South was okay until 1965, along with Fannie Lou Hamer. Now, people said to Lynn, why are you involved with those people? And her answer always was, it's about us. We talk about democracy, freedom, and justice, and there is no those people. It's about us and how we treat people. And she was vilified for that. And now we transplant ourselves to the year 2000, 2010, and those people are not only us, but they've included Muslims. And Lynn's answer is the same. It's not about them. It's about us, how we believe we are. Are we true to who we say we are? And this was the reason why she is vilified today, because she exposes a basic lie in the American system. And the basic lie is we have a problem of Arab oil, or American oil on Arab land. They want it. And this country is no stranger to taking what they want. They took all of America with genocide of the native people here, the indigenous people. They brought us in 1619, and up officially to 1865 we were slaves. Unofficially, from 1865 to 1965 we were slaves, and then they changed the formula. We're still slaves. So Lynn Stewart has looked at these basic issues, and although they changed the name of the people, the Chinese, the Mexicans, Africans, Native Americans, the story stayed the same. And she stayed true to justice. She is heroic. And one of the things I say, well, Lynn Stewart is in jail. She's being punished. But you, I, and everyone here, everyone in America is being punished. Everyone who thinks that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all of these pieces of paper should be brought to fruition is being punished, because she is quite the spokesperson. As you sat and listened and watched her on television, you know that there's no replacement. You see the dream, all of us or none of us. I wish I could say it the way she says it, but I'd like to take exception with Joe here. When you say the law was broken. No, she never broke a law. She violated a prison regulation.
The SAMs.
The SAMs, Special Administrative Measure, which is a prison regulation which stated, let me finish this, which stated clearly, if you violate this regulation, you may be rejected from trying to visit your client.
Okay, caller, are you there? Hello, is there a caller there? Seems we've lost.
Caller, speak up or hold your peace. Caller, are you there?
Caller, are you there? Can I hear you, please?
She's there. They're just working on the technical.
Oh, technical difficulty.
Well, and that's a very interesting point that you're bringing up, because you're talking about the SAMs, which was just to prevent a person from breaking a prison administration. But they.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi. You got a question or comment?
Who is the gentleman who just read the legal document?
That's Joe Friendly.
I'm about to say something that may appear controversial to your panel, but I simply am compelled to do so. Having just returned from South America, I'm very familiar with Brazil in particular. In July 2007, approximately almost 3 years ago to the date, the president of Brazil, Joaquim da Lula Silva, in his opening remarks at the United Nations, said these words. He said that Brazil had the distinction of being the country in the Western Hemisphere with the largest population of African descent. What he did not say is that in spite of that, there were no members of African descent in the commandancia of the hierarchy of the Brazilian military, that the Brazilian Parliament, Congress, is almost lily white, that all of the coroneles of the Policía Federal and the Ejército Nacional are all lily white. Nevertheless, in the United States of America, where people of color are not a majority, there are a plethora of highly placed political officials who are people of color. We have a man of color in the White House. And I think this constant attack against our country is the mantra has grown quite tiresome.
I think we need to interrupt, because I don't think that we are attacking our country. And I'm certainly saying, as a national of the United States, I want my country to be what it professes to be. What we are about is making our country better, where it breaks the laws, where it breaks down rights that are basic to all people, that is when we say our country is wrong. It is not our country right or wrong. It is our country which we will defend when it is correct and which we will point a finger at and accuse when it is wrong. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think we ought to go beyond that, Ralph, because I think that President Lula's statement is interesting, especially since Brazil is loaded down with black prisoners like the United States. The road for a black child in the United States is to prison, not to college. We have hundreds of thousands of black kids in the United States who have been victims not just of the Rockefeller laws, but also of raids of various sorts. Blacks in the United States still are at the bottom of a poverty scale where we are facing, as we always have, hunger and starvation. As a member of Fannie Lou's team, I'm from SNCC in Mississippi. That's 1964 Civil Rights Act has been violated here, even in the terms of Lynne Stewart. So we need to talk about not gaming, because it's games we play. It's games we play. It's not, blacks are not new to American politics. I come from a state that had 2 United States senators. We don't talk about them because they were black, and they both came up in Reconstruction. So we're not new to politics. We also are not new to positions within the white world. It is new that it is accepted that we should be a part of the political system. I was beaten pregnant at Birmingham. My husband and I set up the Black Belt Alabama Board Education Project for blacks for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I walked the whole road, including was a special assistant to Medgar Wiley Evers, worked with Martin King. Let's go forward and stop the game. We certainly have a Civil Rights Act. We have a voting rights, a Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Rights Act. That's stuff that hundreds of thousands, white and black, but primarily blacks, worked on in this country. But we still have not achieved a level of acceptable standard in the political economic system in the United States, and we still remain the victims of rapid racism and rapid racist assaults by police in the United States of America, including the killing of a 7-year-old child in Detroit. How dare you come here playing that game with me about Brazil? Brazil is struggling against the same violence and racism that we suffer against.
Yes, it's interesting what someone hears. I heard Joe read his statement, and then I hear, hey, I'm tired of people bashing America. Where does that come from? He did not address the letter, but that goes to what you were saying, Colia. There is still a bastion of anger against people of color, but they try to address it in another way. Well, look at Brazil. Well, look at... Well, we could look at a lot of things, but basically, I feel I have the right to look at right here because I have traced my relatives back to a plantation in Delaware dating 1815, 1816. We have put in to the land, and we have given to the land. Therefore, I feel I have a right to complain. No one, although we have a president who appears to be us, who says he is us, says no reparations. And I want to know what part of capitalism that is, where you work and don't get paid. Whether you claim, you have a claim to a salary, to, what's the word for it? Remuneration for your labor. And somebody says, no, just throw it in and shut your mouth. That's what I hear the gentleman on the radio saying.
We have another caller. Maybe he'll say something different.
Okay, Cole, are you there?
I just want to make one last statement.
No, cut him off.
Hold
on, wait a minute. I want to hear the statement.
Don't you?
So come back again?
You believe in democracy, don't you?
Is that your last statement?
No, my statement is this. The gentleman just made reference to a historical birthright because his ancestors go back to the 1800s.
I think it's
Hold on.
It's a work right, I said.
Okay, so he made a historical
right
statement.
To remuneration.
So, can I finish my statement?
Yeah, therefore.
Sir, can you not finish? Let's do it another
Hold on, wait a
day.
minute.
I want to get another caller
It's
about
only
Haiti.
Hello, can I finish my statement?
No, I don't.
I want to hear it.
I want to
My
hear it
statement is
also.
this, sir. My ancestors fought in the Grand Union Army on behalf of black liberation in the South. I'm a native of Massachusetts, and my great-great-grandfather fought with the 17th Massachusetts Volunteers.
And therefore?
Christian abolition.
And therefore? Now, I'm going to have to ask you to get to your point. I'm going to have to, because okay, cut that caller, please. Cut that caller. Joe, you wanted to make a response?
Says another caller.
Well, that's okay. I wanted to hear it first.
I want to make some progress in solving the problem. And my appeal here, the letter, is basically to reason, to acknowledge what you said, and you say it beautifully in your letter, that what we're talking about is surrendering to the whole logic of terror. Terror is ruled by fear. And we as a people say, that's not the way we want to go. That's fascism, ruled by fear. And the terror is the logic of fear, right? Ooh, we're terror. All that kind of stuff, we as a people have to say no. And we're asking this judge as a biblical moment in history. He was editor of Harvard Law Review. He was #1 in his class. He is a very smart guy. The other guys above him that ordered him to do this are all right-wing appointed judges. They're all from the Bush administration. So we're asking him to see it clearly. Once you see it clearly, it's pretty obvious judges are not supposed to surrender to politics. They are supposed to do justice.
I think it's wrong to think that we need to appeal to the judge. I think we need to appeal to public opinion. I think people need to know what happened to Lynn Stewart and realize that this is a critical moment in our history, a critical moment where the whole question of terrorism is a buzzword that is being used to stifle dissent, to make us satisfied with the status quo. I believe I say perhaps more clearly in the letter that I wrote. Lynn Stewart's case has been lifted out of the obscurity it might have had if the events of 9/11 had not transpired. Past and the now present White House administration believe that by surrendering our freedoms, we are buying national security. Fighting terror has become a buzzword, allowing us to accept heightened police presence and militarization domestically and abroad has kept us in two costly and unwinnable wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The war on terror is a much, much broader picture, and that is why we have to let people know what has happened to Lynn Stewart and what can we do to let the powers that be understand that there is an aroused public opinion that says, what are you doing?
Now, I think to carry that statement further, Vinie, you're right on the money, and I won't take it, is what we have to give the message to this government. They think that they are going to get over with this, and if we say loud and clear, we're not going to take this step, only then will the government take it back.
Well, you know what happens when you talk to people, right? They have an attitude that they can't do anything because they're just one person, and they have a defeatist attitude. So that's what how do you deal with that?
Well, I just want to speak to the fact that you're right. It is to create an atmosphere in this country where dissent becomes a threat to national security. That's one. But more importantly, it goes to something very basic, and that is to create such fear in the legal establishment that lawyers will refuse because of the terror against the legal profession that this case has brought. This is a case of terror against the legal profession of the United States, which means that lawyers will refuse to honestly and openly obey their oath to represent their clients to the best of their ability, which means that First Amendment rights have been tossed under the bus along with Lynn Stewart.
And understand, not only lawyers have been intimidated, you clearly saw a judge who was intimidated.
Amen.
And this represents a society that's supposed to stand between us and oppressive government that has been trampled upon.
Yeah, we're back to 1852, the 1852 Fugitive Slave Act, which permitted the it's assigned Union Army troops to chase down runaway slaves, in quotes.
And enslaved people, enslaved Africans.
That's right, the enslaved Africans. So the runaway Africans who ran out of the enslavement wherever they could run, or ran north in most cases. But it meant that any judge anywhere in the United States who seemed
upheld that law,
who seemed to struggle against the new law, was himself, herself, himself in this case, sent to jail.
And let's go further than that.
Yes,
beyond that, what happened? Why did they do away with the fugitive slave law? Because it was unenforceable. Oftentimes when they went to a town to capture a slave, the people in the town said no. And then they found that sheriffs who were trying to do their duty to obey the law, the unjust law as written, where they were being killed. That meant the people said no. And when it became unenforceable, then they had to rescind the law.
Yeah, but that same climate, Ralph, I want to get at the creation of that climate, because that is a climate where law itself is of no value and of no use. So that we can go to cases in Pennsylvania, cases in Massachusetts, and even New York, where judges were afraid to make a decision for fear they too would go to jail, and where the Africans and others who had served in the abolitionist movement were running out of the country, either further north as they could go, Rochester, Buffalo, or out of the country into Canada because of that Fugitive Slave Act. That's the law. That's where we are now.
Can I just close with this idea? That guy brought up the race issue, as you said, out of hand. I didn't talk about it.
Exactly.
But I wanted to get to the basic thing. He did say that you shouldn't be picking on our country. And the point is, we're arguing we need fundamental change. We have corruption. And that's the issue. And we're trying to deal with the corruption. If the this is a long shot, I agree. And I agree with you. You're right. We have to change it from a broader view. But at this moment, I was using the gimmick of a letter to the judge to provoke it. If he did do the right thing in his heart, then it would be revolutionary. Then that would provoke people to start wondering, we do need corruption. In other words, let me put it this way. It's a political crime.
But it's also an urgency when people say that black folks should not have a voice, that black folks should shut their mouths and not complain about the abuses and the racist system in which we live in the United States of America, where hundreds of thousands of us have just lost our homes, where hundreds of thousands of us have just lost our jobs, millions, you're right, have lost our jobs, where we are right now in the worst school systems in urban centers and probably all over the country in the history of any nation. Our kids are not being educated. And somebody said, well, you shut up because you got a black president. Well, I don't care if I got 5 black presidents. I am going to stay on the battlefield fighting for injustice against anyone, whether they be Arab, whether they be Jews, whether they be African, whether they be out of Central and South America, if they came from the moon and they're human. We have an obligation to fight for human rights.
Let me bring this back to one legal point of personal interest of mine in the case, because I put in a camera in a court motion to actually film the court case, because one of the aspects of Lynn's trial was that they wanted to use tape recordings of Lynn's conversation with the sheik in her trial. Now, as you know, there's such a thing called, or at least there used to be called, such a thing as the attorney-client privilege.
Yeah, it's been going out.
This was completely overturned in her case, and they were listening to the conversation and used it in court.
And what I like to say about that, the most important thing is, yes, there was no attorney-client privilege, but there was no crime being committed while they were filming. Therefore,
they were committing the crime.
While they were committing the crime, there was no crime that Lynn Stewart and her client were committing. So therefore, this is why you have, she was keeping the guards from listening to her conversations. She bragged about keeping the guards from listening to her conversations. Yes, she bragged about keeping the guards from listening to her conversations. Guards are supposed to listen to our conversations with our attorney. The government is supposed to listen. No, they covered up a crime of their own by impugning Lynn Stewart's, saying, you see how well I did that. She did it very well, and any lawyer who doesn't do it very well should not call themselves a lawyer.
All right.
That principle you know, once you start turning principles like that on its head, right? So what's next then? You know, what's next?
What they've shown is the power of the media to take any just act, cover their own crime, and turn it into a crime of the person who's being honest. And I say to people, and the thing that grabs me here, I hear us talking, our side has lost a major voice. Yeah, I imagine that caller out there is probably reacting to my energy here. I'm angry. You have a point of view. Lynn Stewart could sit here and tell you, give us our point of view, put it out there very well, without creating anger, with being very precise. So therefore, they had to put Lynn Stewart away. And they decided 28 months isn't long enough. Have to put her away till 10 years until all of this blows over. Because Lynn Stewart herself, and I'm so glad that she continued to speak, because we can go back to those times she spoke. We can go back to her appearances in law schools. We can go back to all of the statements she's made, and we can get the positive feeling and the truth that she brings out in a way that when she tells her clients when she was a lawyer, I can say it in a way that a jury can best understand it. So they've gotten rid of Lynn Stewart for a little while, but thanks to modern marvels, we still have Lynn Stewart with us, and we can play these Lynn Stewart videos over and over again.
And we have ourselves. I think this is a time when we should let people know how they can be in touch with the Lynn Stewart Defense Committee, so that if we have a telephone number or an email address, maybe you can, before the program is over, say that more than once. I
can say it over and over again. One of the things that keeps Lynn Stewart lifted up is the voices from around the country and around the world to send to Lynn Stewart. And remember this number, Lynn Stewart, MCC, that's Manhattan Correctional Center, New York, 150 Park Row, 53504-054 2 South. And I'm going to repeat that again. Lynn Stewart, MCC, 150 Park Row, New York.
Well, I think one of the things that you have to realize is that the judges took the direction of the appellate court. It's a comparatively young judge, probably wants to rise in the judicial system, and he is not going to go against the dictates of the executive branch of our government, because it's the Attorney General who represents the executive branch, which dictates.
There have been many cases where judges did not take direction from the appellate court. Yes, there are many cases that.